Greetings, community, and welcome to Hangout of the Avatar. We're going to be taking a look back at R8 and a look forward at R9 today, and we've got some amazing people that I get to work with every day with us here today. Let's start off with Richard.
Hey everybody, great to be with you. Thank you all so much for being a part of our amazing community. Thanks for following along with our game production and contributing to it all the times you have. Anyway, thank you. We wouldn't be here without you, quite literally. Over to you, Starr.
Welcome everyone to hopefully our regular hangout, and thank you as well for being such a great community and helping us make this game. And we had a really good time in Release 8, and we look forward to Release 9.
Howdy folks, Chris here, since Gina didn't say my name. Looking forward to talking to you guys today, and I think we've got like 200 questions queued up here, so don't be sad when we don't get through them all, but we will talk really fast if we can.
Chris, when I said I get to work with some amazing people, I just assumed that they would automatically think of you. So, like Chris was saying, we've got 4 pages of your questions, so I am definitely going to be focusing and trying to get as many as possible, but I am going to take priority for questions involving either R8 stuff or stuff we've talked about getting into R9. So, without wasting any more time, let's get to the first question, which comes from Lord Lon Bimmer. He wants to know, is there going to be any improvement in the harvesting of materials for crafting, and is there encumbrance in the next release?
Right now, our focus continues to be on combat, so there won't be really any material changes to harvesting, and encumbrance is not coming on in Release 9.
Yeah, we evaluated adding encumbrance because it is part of the balancing factor for combat. We just decided it was a minor enough balancing factor that it's definitely not going to be in for R9. Might make R10. If anything comes online in terms of harvesting, it'll just be for maybe some specific play modes or something like that for combat-based stuff. Not expected.
Our next suggestion comes from Smack. He wants to have the ability to equip multiple decks and split the hotbar between them.
What do you think of that one, Chris?
I think he's insane. I actually didn't read these ahead of time, so I'm just seeing that and hearing this idea for the first time. With multiple decks. Okay, so I kind of see what he's suggesting. We definitely are not going to try it for R9. I can see that there could be some advantages to it, but I think right now we're going to see how people swallow going forward in the next release, where they have more skills to choose from, more, we'll probably be building out larger decks, and probably now have the opportunity to build out multiple decks. I think we're going to have enough things to chew on for R9 and R10 as it is. So definitely not for R9 and R10, but that's an interesting idea of having multiple decks. And you will be able to swap decks. You can't already do that. This will be, he's talking about actually splitting, so you have 2 decks, I guess, side by side. So an interesting idea that could add some new play mechanics, but we got to nail down the ones we got first.
Our next question comes from Crossbow Soda. He wants to know, aside from player freedom of choice, what are some benefits of having PvP-friendly cities or towns? I think he means player towns.
So if I think I understand the question is, what is the benefit to running a town and a player-owned town and flagging it PvP?
You get to PvP more?
Yeah, you get to PvP in your town, and you get to organize with the people in your town to do PvP.
I think it is just a matter of taste. At least we don't currently plan to give you extra bonuses or less bonuses or extra spawns in your town or less spawns in your town. It really is merely that specific individual switch. And I think it's just that some of these people who are owning towns have a theory of how they like the world to feel, and if that's the way you want your town to feel, you want to live on the Wild West, in the Wild West, so to speak, then have at it. And people can choose to come into your town or not choose to come into your town, as those individuals select, of course.
And in the long run, there could be some benefits. It all depends on what we do in terms of reward for PvP. Definitely for R9 and R10, we're not going to be having any of those penalties or rewards in place. Well, no penalties in place for R9 for sure. We'll see on R10. But yeah, long run, it could be good if your town is always killing people that comes into it, and you can take some item of loot off of it.
Okay, next.
I'm going to be peppering these with things from the chat room too, because I didn't want you guys in the chat room to feel left out. Mulger Tab, I think I'm pronouncing that right, wants to know can you describe the concept of teams for R9?
That's a great question. We actually just discussed that over lunch. Really, right now, all these kinds of things are iterative approaches. So our goal for R9 is just to, at a very simple level, create the actual concept of a team, and then set up some very basic rules so that players can have team versus team events, like say in the arena, with some sort of time limit and a score. I mean, it's very, very, very simple iteration of this round. Long term, that kind of rule set is something we'd like to expose to the players as options to set up, in their arena basement and things like that. But right now, we're talking about a very simple concept of there's a, for lack of a better term, there's a chaos team and an order team. A red team versus blue team, and it's really just sort into the separate teams, fight each other, have a kill counter, have a time limit. When the time limit's up, whichever team had the most kills win.
I'm hoping we can get a little more than that in. I've got a couple other play modes that I've written up, but we'll see. Really just try and get a few things in so that we can reduce the chaos of the combat and try to get things a little more organized. Just because it's hard to tell what balance is when it's like 5 random dudes ganking 1 random dude, or vice versa. Well, 1 wouldn't gank 5. But anyways, random killing does not help us really balance things and tell who is winning. So,
It's fun, though.
it is fun.
Speaking of random killing and fun, Lord Lich Ravicus has a question about evil housing and evil swag items. So sacrificial altars, blood smears, all that fun stuff. Do we have any plans for that, especially to help adorn PvP-enabled areas?
That's really funny. You all in our community, would really enjoy being the fly on the wall often here to hear how Starr and I take opposite sides of some very interesting conversations. In particular, I being the king of virtue compared to the king of chaos, I am usually the person arguing more to give people things that might be visually horrific and or activities that are somewhat more horrific. And Starr generally falls in the line of let's not be so gruesome or horrible. So I'm sure that there will be more of that in than you see now, but there will be a balance because again, Starr and I arm wrestle and occasionally either one of us might win.
Yeah, and I mean, just up from at a very high level, I mean, we do have on the schedule to create some player housing that has more of a, quote, dark look to it. Like right now, we have the, quote, wizard towers that look very, good and fanciful, and we have discussed, and it's on the queue, to create a darker version of it, with spikes and dark stone and things like that. And we do have props that we're already using in the dungeons that are, darker, more evil things that we can absolutely turn into decorations for people's houses. So, yes, you will be able to theme your house, both the structure itself and the decoration, in a more dark manner.
And for the evil themed player towns, PvP enabled, I'm sure we're going to come up with some signs that will show, like, there have been X number of visitors killed to our town, or have like a little graveyard, or it has been X hours since the last visitor was killed, or the last person died in this town type sign. So they'll fight to keep those numbers as low as possible and as high as possible. So it's been 7 minutes since the last person was killed. We'll try to get some of those type things in. So I guess that'll be one benefit to the PvP.
Yeah.
That sounds really fun. Our next question comes from the chat room. Exodus wants to know if root, stun, and knockdown are current, or wants to point out that root, stun, and knockdown currently shut down a target. Can you explain how these statuses will be tweaked? For example, will there be diminishing returns or something that make them a little less OP?
Yeah, so there's supposed to be some diminishing returns in there already. That getting stunned gives you a stun resist buff. I thought that was in for the release, but I did not verify it. I think it actually was in, but it didn't give you an icon. It's kind of where I think it got to.
Yeah, there was no visual feedback that told you you were getting this resistance buff, and the numbers, the values associated with it, I think were so low that it was not noticeable. So it'll be a much steeper curve that'll. We definitely are aware and will actively prevent the chain stun effect.
And as for knockdown and jump, or knockdown and roots and other things, that's jump is still an option. We may need to do some tweaking on that. Part of that will also come from being heavily encumbered and high strength and things that aren't, values that are in there. So we can't get all of the math nailed down right now until we have other elements in there. But we're well aware that in most every game that you've got to balance the root, stun, knockdown, interrupt type stuff. And also with this release, we'll be tuning that further because that's one of the things with blunt weapons like maces, is they come more with stun type effects rather than damage type effects. So definitely tons of tuning to go.
Jackknife would like to know that we mentioned Lunar Gates being active in R9. Will there be other modes of fast travel other than the Lunar Gates?
Not in release 9.
It'll still be the slash zone. I don't think we're going to take that out.
Yeah, slash zone and slash home will be still be active in release 9.
Hey, somebody made an interesting suggestion too, which is to add a separate subject, of course. Basement hatches. Right now, they're all always on the floor, but since they're a teleporter, just like the entrance to the clink is a door on a wall, we could give people door wall kind of entrances as well, so they don't all have to be the square hole in the floor. It's true.
Although, unless there's a stairwell behind it, if you just put that door on your outside wall, where does it go?
But for certain basement types, you could give them the other type. You could make it standard to be the other type.
Potentially. Yeah.
That'd be fun. You can put a bookcase in front of it or something like that to hide it.
Yeah.
Put the wardrobe over it.
Lord Darkmoon would like to know, can highlighting of objects become optional?
Yeah, that's pretty easy. We had not talked about it. It is one of those things we know that some people don't like the highlighting. It's just as soon as we make it optional, we worry that people who do use it will have an advantage over those who don't. We're always looking for less obtrusive ways of handling that. Maybe we can have some type of slider to tune down the thickness, brightness, how much it jumps out at you. I know that it bothers some people for immersion reasons. We just hate not making combat more confusing than it already is. So trying to make it clear who your target is.
Yeah, I would wait until much lower. That's my advice to that player would be wait until we're much closer to done. It's actually pretty easy for us to put that in as a flag if that seems useful and important toward the end. But no reason to. We've got so many other big problems right now to deal with. Put it off.
Okay, our next question is coming from the chat room. J-Rab noticed that archers had limited amount of arrows and wanted to know if either mages were going to get unlimited magic or if there was going to be some kind of implementation in the future to kind of make that a little bit more fair. And I know that reagents are one thing we talked about for R9, correct?
Yeah, we just reviewed this today, didn't we, guys? All three of us. Of the guys on the call.
Just to be clear, we do not like archers, and we don't want them playing our game, so we're going to leave things just the way they are. We're going to make them, you have to craft it an arrow at a time, one arrow at a time, and you have to chop down one tree per arrow.
Yeah, it takes an entire tree to make a single arrow.
No, we knew we were pooping on the archers for this release, just in a number of ways, but that's one of the things, is they're the first ones we got ammo in for, so they're the first ones who really have to worry about consumables, and then we also didn't do the archery tree, and then there's a number of other balance issues. You still can be a pretty effective archer just because of the what is like the crippling shot that would slow people down. It was like super easy to kite one-on-one. It's just if you were an archer and you were expecting to do a ton of damage remotely, you really had to slow kite people across the world by shot. Yes, we will be doing reagents for this release, and I think we've settled on the plan that's definitely going to go in for R9. Not all spells will take reagents, but you can expect any spells of significant power to take reagents. So we will be crippling them. Do we want to share the current plan for casting without reagents?
Sure.
Since we haven't talked to people about that before. So the current plan for casting, you will be able to cast most things without reagent. It will add a fizzle chance, and it will add a significant focus multiplier. And so what you kind of have to look at is if you're looking at the comparable power of like things without reagents, in terms of efficiency, there are things that require reagents, they're going to be more efficient when you have the reagent, comparing like apples to apples, just looking at two similar spells. So having the reagent will increase the efficiency of it. If you're casting a spell that requires a reagent and you don't have the reagent, then it's significantly worse. So you're talking about a factor of like maybe it's 30% less or more efficient for things that require reagents, and then if you don't have it, it's twice as inefficient.
And that's just the implementation we're going with for Release 9. We do realize that there's a balance that has to be struck between what we were just talking about, the ammo cost for people using ranged weapons and magic users using reagents, and balanced against the durability of items and weapons and armor that fighters have to do. So we realize that there's all sort of interconnected, and we will be balancing all of those against each other. But at the same time, some of the lower level spells, having reagent requirements for those, if all you are is a magic user, seemed like a barrier to entry and just not fun. But we're going to experiment with it, we're going to play with it, and if we do feel like it's not balanced or it can't get it to an equilibrium, we will adjust accordingly.
And also the way it's set up right now, we can define the multiplier for how much more it costs and the numbers per spell. So we can make some spells like just required. You have like 100 times multiplier for focus cost if it is if you don't have the reagent. So we are going to have a number of spells that will require reagents. It would just be kind of some of those, the lowest level spells, like the cantrip level type spells, those aren't going to require. The mid level spells will require, and then the high level spells will absolutely require. You can't cast them.
Hey, are you going to give people a PvP counter yet, or a death counter, or kills counter, so in R9, so to help them out with?
Yeah, there'll actually be a new window that you'll be able to pull up that will show various metrics, numbers for how many people are killed. It will show team score type stuff.
Cool.
Lord Bimmer noticed that a lot of the development and design of the character is getting more options. So we're putting more into character options. But he wants to know if there'll ever be a time when he doesn't have to rush in and choose a house lot and miss out on all that, which I know I take forever in character too.
Let me talk this
I get it.
So one of my greatest hates of a lot of contemporary MMO-style games, especially those that have highly customizable avatars, is that you are forced to do all that customization up front. And that's before you actually know if you're even going to like the game that lies beyond it. And at least by my experience, after spending 30 minutes, an hour to creating my character, and then I drop into the world and go, yep, there's the weapon shop over there and the magic shop over there and the level 1 monsters waiting for me to grind on them over there and a person with their exclamation point over their head telling me to go grind on those monsters. And then I immediately, after playing for 15 minutes, I go, I'm never going to play this game again. So I spent an hour creating my character to find out in 15 minutes that my whole hour and 15 minutes was now wasted. And so, yes, we absolutely are going to make it such that your character can be modified once you are in the game. We have a shop that I playfully have called the new U486, kind of patterned after Logan's Run, if you remember that movie where you can change your looks with the big laser machine. But we have a different metaphor, of course, for this game. But those beauty shops that will allow you to make those tunes in your character will be in-game, not you won't be forced to worry about whether you got it perfected outside the game.
I am very happy with that answer. Yes, we get happy sometimes too. Wrath Phoenix wants to know, he understands there's a lot of talk now about combat, that's what we're focusing on, but he wants to know if there are any plans for non-combat skills like sneaking, music, stealing, begging, taming, that kind of thing.
Definitely taming, that's part of the forestry skill. We've talked about it in other hangouts. As far as some of the there will be musical instruments that can be played. Right now, we're not planning on that being a skill per se, at least for episode 1. And as far as stealing, that's not something definite for episode 1, although it's something we have discussed periodically.
But yes, in the short term, release 9 and 10 are going to continue focus on combat and try not to pull people off of that stuff. There's a lot of, even though they seem like very different systems, there's a lot of shared things between them. Like our animators are all focused on animating combat stuff and particle effects and those type of things. So definitely not for R9 or 10.
Now, I know there's mention of artists in R9, and Lord Darkmoon would like to know, how will the story of the game continue to be presented? Will there be in-game cutscenes, like dragons swooping down on a city? How will the actual storyline be carried on?
Let me take that one. The story is all going to be through in-game events. We don't plan any separate cutscenes or animations other than one at the very, very beginning to kind of set the stage. But within the game, it's going to be NPCs and actions and activities happening in and around you in-game that advance the story. So everything's in-game.
Wrath Phoenix wants to know if we can elaborate a little bit more on player progression, how gaining levels or gaining skills will work, how crafting versus adventure skills will differ.
Sure, I'll start, and then I'll let Chris chime in too. Right now, we are pushing advancement off a little ways. Right now, probably the earliest you'll encounter it might be release 11, and mainly that's because we really want to focus on getting people being able to test just about anything and not have things gated by level. And because a lot of times we've seen in previous products that if you put advancement in, you get your first, 5 or 10 levels highly polished, but very few of your users ever get to the higher levels, and so your tuning for those higher levels doesn't get nearly as much attention as lower levels. So that's one reason to push it off. And the way it will work, just at a very broad outline, is that depending on what your primary activity is, you will get experience points related to that. So if you're going around doing crafting type stuff, you're going to get crafting experience, which will then translate into a crafting level. When you level up, you will get skill points that you can spend in crafting skills, and you may, every few levels, also get a few points to allocate in adventuring skills like combat and magic, just so you're not completely isolated from those. And the same is true on the other side, that if you are using adventuring skills, combat, magic, etc., then you will get adventuring experience, which will then translate to adventuring levels, which will then translate to skill points that you get that you can spend on adventuring skills, and every so often you will also get some crafting points that you can allocate on crafting. So we want you to have the ability to dabble over on the other side, even if you are spending most of your time doing one of the other activities. That's it at a very broad stroke.
In the short term, we'll probably, I think B was going to add a few items that would give you effectively make you a higher level person and let you focus, like maybe, add a few different rings, one that will add points to strength, one to int, one to dex, just so you can try out some of the, how it feels different to have different stats and how it affects combat. We do have underlined stuff in there already for it. Actually, I cheated last release. I did a couple times. I went and shouted, I'll give epic plate mail to whoever can kill me 3 times in the arena. and went and let people kill me 3 times. I didn't tell people, but I actually was leveling myself up, adding 10 levels to myself, and also adding some stats to myself just to see how it played, to see how it felt. Could I, how many 5-year-olds could you take type thing? If Richard Young knows that what that's all about. But I could not take many 5-year-olds in case it was pretty obvious.
I would not hold back, man. I could take a bunch of 5-year-olds, man.
Well, and I think that's an important note, though, that one of the things we're doing with our leveling is we don't want this exponential difference between high-level players and low-level players. Richard often used the analogy of a normal person like you and me versus an Olympian, and so we want people at the quote max level to basically be like an Olympian, like the world's strongest human, not necessarily a godlike being. And so that's the sort of difference. Like, so with that analogy, it's enough. A boxer, a professional boxer. If you get like 20 regular people, they could take down a professional boxer. If they coordinated their attack. Versus,
but any one of us would definitely lose. Having tried to play that game with Jesus Chavez, you won't score a point.
In most games, though, the highest level character could waste 20 low level characters easily without even breaking a sweat. And so we want to keep a much flatter curve there, less of a exponential difference between the highest level and the lowest level.
So just to jump in on that as well. As part of the quietly behind the scenes, making sure that there aren't exploits in there and there's not good farming opportunities and people don't have ways to hack at do stuff evil at level 1. The curve, like a level 1, is not going to have much of a chance against the level 20. It kind of gets, once you get up past those newbie levels, like level 20s will have good chances against level 30s or 40s or stuff like that. But we kind of make you get over a little bit of a hump before you really get into that. Now the power is evening out. And part of that is just so people can't grief with level, we're just going to attack you with a bunch of naked level 1s or whatever and not care about the consequences, even if our character's going to get banned or whatever. So just adding that up.
Okay.
Our next question kind of ties into that. It's from Andy. He wants to know about any plans for intelligence, wisdom, dexterity, classic, bonuses, and could you talk a little bit more about passive and non-combat skills and how they'll appear in the next releases?
Traditional strength, dex, int. They all figure into formulas in different ways.
Yeah, and Chris, before you go there too, can I just mention somebody else also had asked me about wisdom and charisma and other more what I would call obscure attributes.
What about piety?
Piety, sure. There's all kind. You can generate an infinite number, but one of my beliefs that started literally back with D&D 1, much less a Calabath, when at first I was really just trying to take Dungeons and Dragons honestly and make a computer game of it. I quickly realized that even if I put in something like wisdom or constitution, that unless the game was regularly referring to that attribute, then that attribute, of course, especially if the attribute was never referenced, then of course it literally is, by definition, useless. But even an attribute that is only referenced in one case or two cases, or very, if, for example, charisma was only useful for talking with a shopkeeper and only was a formula as to the way it would come out, I still don't think that's a terribly useful. There's no reason to have a charisma in that case. You might as well give more function to for example, if you have intelligence feeding into both magic and some negotiation, then that gives more purpose to the few that you keep. So I am a strict minimalist when it comes to foundational character attributes. So that's why we really just have 3, and down through the years we've changed what they're called. Sometimes they're strength, dex, intelligence, sometimes they've been body, mind, and spirit, but it's always fairly minimal, and then pass over back to you, Chris, where then Chris uses that to extrapolate a great deal of additional meaning. And not only in the combat system, but throughout the game, these will be the foundation of the way your character extrapolates information.
Yeah, I mean, we want just enough so that we can let you make your character a little bit different. You can kind of determine how you're focusing on things. Really, we want your skill in the game to show through. We don't want this to be a spreadsheet game. That was part of why Richard had made that request, and I totally agree with all of his requirements. And Richard, by the way, you got to have a 17 charisma to be a paladin. Everybody knows that's one of the big uses for a charisma. You can't be a paladin with charisma.
Of course. You must be talking about those newfangled advanced D&D rules. You know, I stopped at the 3 books. Yeah, I've got my 3 books just sitting right over here somewhere.
But yeah, so I don't see that as being something that'll change.
Here's the right rule book to use, right here, dudes, right here.
I think mine are in a box somewhere in the attic. But yeah, so 3 statistics. And again, most of the how you're different will come through skill, like abilities, spells, how you put that stuff together, how you put your character together, and less about, like, I'm just represented by these 3 numbers. Those will be the things that kind of can fine-tune, they can help determine a lot of things. They'll be used for a lot of the underlying math, but they very much are not defining your character. And it's also true that, like, you know, if you put the wrong point somewhere, it's not like if you put 3 points in strength and you only meant to put 2 in there, you're going to be screwed forever. They're very minor tweaks. They're used, again, they're used for the foundational type stuff and the basis for everything. And they're also very linear to less than linear. It's really a common factor, a base number, and then stats generally add some linear amount to it, which is also based or following along with the whole. We're not exponentially more powerful. You know, you're not going to have 10,000 hit points when a level 1 has 100. It's really, I forget what the actual numbers are, but I think it's about a factor of, I think a level 20 to a level like 100 if we follow the spreadsheet all the way up that high. So it's about a factor of maybe 3 or 4 in terms of how many times more hit points you have. So.
And I think part of the other question was like innate or passive skills. So those of you who've like looked at some of the skill trees in the game and noticed that there's basically 2 divisions in all the skill trees. There's active glyphs, so active skills. Those are ones that you use during combat. Those are attacks or buffs or debuffs or heals. And then there are innate or passive skills, and those are things that you spend points on that will increase the effectiveness of all things related to that. So we in Release 8 we had it just for blades and heavy armor, but those innate skills increase your functionality with those schools. So in like fire, when you increase the innate fire skills, that does things like increases the amount of damage that your fire spells do, or the range that you can shoot your fire spells at. And that affects all of them. And we chose that early on versus the more sort of traditional route where when you level up a skill, that skill gets better because we felt like there were more customization options if you made those things independent of each other. So if you want to spend a lot of points pumping up your innate skills and only focusing on a few skills related to them, then you can basically become the best fireball caster, you know, there is, versus, oh, I'm going to have to, you know, the only way to get the fireball up is to just pump its points in fireball. So that's kind of the way innates are going to work.
And also, just I've talked about before, but there's kind of the 3 levels of duration for things. There's kind of the passive things that are always on that are like I've put skills into plus damage with sword. There's the duration things of like I've cast a buff on myself, and then there's kind of the instantaneous or like 1 hit type thing. And we rate all those in terms of how much power they have. Like passive stuff, like if you have like a passive strength buff, maybe like every skill point gets you 2 points. So like, you know, plus 2 strength. Whereas if you have like a buff where I have a strength buff I cast myself that lasts for 5 minutes, you know, that may add 10 strength. And then if it's instantaneous, my next attack gets plus X, like I've got my fury attack type thing. That may be like plus 30. So we rate those like passive things will always generally be the weakest. You know, duration things will be next, and then instantaneous one-off will be the most powerful, and that's just, again, how we can balance things. The more active we can make you be, the more you are willing to work at things, the better. And passives are really just the easiest, laziest ones. Anyways, just adding that on.
Our next question is about magic. Actually, comes from two different people, one from chat and one from the forums. Dr. Doom isn't really happy with the fizzle mechanic, so he wants to know if there's alternatives. And kind of similarly, Quetzalcoatl would like to know, is there any way to interrupt magic spells? And can you talk a little bit more about that if there is?
Yeah, so there are already a class of spells in the game that were in Release 8 that could be interrupted. Basically, anything that's got a long cast time. So the best example is Fireball. So if you see someone casting a Fireball, you have a decent amount of time to interrupt them. And if you interrupt them, they have to start over casting that spell. So interrupts already exist in the game. Now, as Chris was pointing out earlier, there are other spells or abilities that are instant and they cannot be interrupted, but there are also a class of spells that can be. So that's already in the game and it's working, and as we add more higher level spells, because in general the interrupts are spells that can be interrupted are spells that are very powerful, and so as we add more skills to the game that you can spells that are higher level, you'll see more interruptible ones, as well as on the other side of that, more abilities that are really good at interrupting because they're instants.
And just to go into a little more detail on that, we will probably expand how many spells can be interrupted. B was actually taking a pass at that this weekend. She was going over trying to sanity check a lot of stuff. And there's three numbers really, three time numbers go along with every spell or skill. There's the concentration time, that's the upfront time, that's what can be interrupted. I think we only had 2 or 3, Fireball and Root I know were 2 of them. And if you want to see what it actually looks like, you can go and cast a Fireball in game. Well, next time you get in, you cast Fireball in game. You'll like to see there's a little bar that goes across the bottom. If you get hit while that bar is going across, it'll jump back. Or if you move, it'll just vanish completely. But that's the concentration time. That's the part where you can be interrupted on that. We will definitely continue tuning that, probably to make that bigger. The second part is just how long it takes to complete the casting of it. Almost all spells have some amount of that time. That's just kind of how long it takes. There's a third one that is invisible to everybody, but you can find through experimenting, which I can tell you now since you guys are all watching will reward you, is if you put a bar in or a spell into your locked slot when you click it, you'll see it takes some amount of time before you can reuse it, the cooldown timer. On the back end for spells that go into your deck, when you actually use something out of a deck, not in a locked slot but out of the deck, you use it, it doesn't immediately go back into the deck, it actually goes into another pool until that cooldown timer is out, and then it goes back into the deck. There's actually the three numbers there for all those people who are focused a lot on the game mechanics.
And then there was the other comment about not liking fizzle. So we actually discussed that earlier today as well, and talked about the frequency and the percentage. And one of the unintended side effects of the skill trees we chose to work on in Release 8 was that they were almost counter to each other. So we had heavy armor and fire magic. And heavy armor increases fizzle, yet fire magic was like one of the only fully developed schools that you could employ outside of blades, and so you had people trying to combine heavy armor and fire magic. Well, versus us having classes the way we are, balancing, having heavy armor and magic and not restricting you, not saying, hey, you can't wear heavy armor and cast fire magic, is through tuning with mechanics like fizzle.
And also, different spells, that's another one of those places where we have a number. There's a base fizzle chance on any spell. Then you will have mechanics that will allow you to decrease that, and there will be other things that increase. There's also a armor multiplier on that. So your armor will have a multiplier to the base fizzle chance, and we tune that per spell. So some things like a pure light wounds type thing, a quick heal, will have a very low multiplier. It may have a 1 or 0 multiplier. But fire magic has a very high multiplier. A lot of different magic types have a high. But it depends on kind of what things feel like they make sense in heavy armor. So like light magic will probably be more cast with magic.
And it dawned on me that one of the things you just said there, Chris, means that if you can take that number below 1, it means you could have something that actually improved your fizzle chances by having a wizard robes that had a 0.5 in there instead of a 1.
Yeah, yep, exactly. Or wands and staves.
Exactly, or wands and staves have an anti-fizzle factor.
Mm-hmm.
So since you brought up robes, it was actually brought up by several different people in the forums, the questions we took ahead of time. They want to know when actual mage robes will be coming into play.
Well, anyone who has worn anything cloth-related in our game, especially the dresses, I've noticed there are some challenges with cloth simulation inside the engine, which we are doing the best we can with the technology that as it exists today. We're looking forward to some improvements in future versions of Unity and the plugin that we use that will allow us to do better cloth simulation. And so right now, we're pretty much not adding any more content that relies on a really solid, beautiful cloth simulation just because we can't get there yet. And so that mage robes is one of those why we're not spending a lot of time making that, and by extension, why we're not spending a lot of time making more dresses as well.
Yeah, for anyone who's seen other games, I mean, this is one of those common things. There's a reason that women wear pants in a lot of games. Doing cloth sims around tight moving objects is just not going to happen. Right now, most things are not animated. The way to make it look good is animate stuff down there, but then we also do a lot of animation, blending, and there's some other weirdness in there. So really right now, we're counting on Cloth Sim for a lot of the stuff around the legs and floats and other things. We're using a separate plugin that's not part of Unity instead of Unity's Cloth Sim for a number of reasons, but one of the big ones was it was better performance. But we've had challenges. So it's one of those things we've kicked down the road because we expect it to be fixed in a later version of Unity. So how did we get on cloth?
Someone asked about, because we were talking about mage robes having a fizzle, helping with this.
Anti-fizzle.
Yeah. Okay.
Our next question comes from Jerk, and no, I'm not making that up. He recognizes that combos seem to be an important part of the deck combat system, but he noticed that combos weren't available to him, and he wanted to know whether that was by design or whether it was just the way he had set up his hotbar.
Well, if you look at our schedule, combos weren't scheduled for Release 8, so there was no combo functionality in Release 8. That's on schedule for Release 9. So the reason you couldn't do it is because it did not exist.
Can you talk a little bit more about combos?
Sure. Actually, I'll let Chris take that one.
So we've got a number of combos designed out. They're really going to be ways. They will not be available to the lock card option. We call those. We used to call those noble slots, which I think only about 10% of people got. But that's because it was like noble gases where they can't combine with it.
Like it. I would still call those that.
So the noble slots with the fixed cards, the locked cards.
Yep.
But anyway, on the actual dealt out glyphs. Yes, the glyphs, correct. Thank you, Richard. The dealt out glyphs, those can be combined either by dragging them or by using the hotkey and then pressing the two numbers for them. And when they combine, they'll combine into something more powerful, like a more powerful version, either of the same spell or a new spell altogether. And again, it's a skill mechanic. When you do that, it will reset the timer on the new one, so it'll hang around for a while. And there's a lot of, there'll be some things in there that you can combine 3 or 4 times. I think Starr is actually switching over to try to pull up a list of things that's going to be in there. For instance, one of the ones that will be, I'm pretty sure is going to be in there is with the fire magic and stuff that people have seen. Is you can do fire elemental, but combining a fireball with the fire elemental before you summon the fire elemental. Basically, moving the fireball onto the fire elemental will create a slightly more powerful version of the fire elemental. And you can do that up to 3 times to get a slightly bigger and bigger fire elemental before you summon it. But they kind of work just how you would expect, which is if you use like a gust and, I'm trying to remember what some of the combos are.
Well, I'm trying to show them to you.
Oh.
So, like, Like, so for instance, one is combine. If you combine Fireball and Gust, that creates like a cone damage that hits multiple targets, but also has a knockback chance. So it combines the secondary. So one of the principles of combos is they'll often combine some of the secondary effects of the contributing skills.
And obviously, these are going to be ones that over time, we will continue adding more and more of these. And as there are more and more in there, people will be designing their decks probably around knowing what combos. It's a common card game mechanic. Some cards work together well.
Yeah.
You guys can't see, but we're actually looking at a list of all the combos that are going to be in there for it. But again,
while we're waiting on that, and we're talking about R9 stuff, you said that we were going to be adding skills to some of the other trees. We did have a question from JS Choice on the forums that wanted to know what other options for healing were going to be coming online soon. And were there be non-combat options for healing, like potions, bandages, that kind of thing?
Yes.
So when can we expect that?
We should have potions. I don't know about bandages, and no food. There definitely will be potions, though. We're pretty sure there will be potions.
We are trying as a stretch goal for Release 9 to have potions.
And I think we need to have them because it's one of those things right now, like if you think about like fighters, they kind of, their focus is health. I mean, that's what they live and die by, is their health. They do use some focus. But right now, without having potions in there or a way for people to make focus potions, mages, when they run out of focus, they're done.
Yeah.
And it's one of those balancing elements that we really, we have to have it by R10 so we can make sure that the balance is there and the mages work as we expect. But it's, I think we're going to have it in for R9. I think we're only a few minor tweaks away from getting it. But probably bandages, no, and food, no. Food, Richard's got a big, long document on the how all the food stuff works. Yeah, and that'll probably be more of a long-term boost. There may be, I don't remember if there's any eat your pie and you get health right now type thing.
Yeah, although let me even just speak a little bit to cooking and crafting in general. I know I've been pushing Starr to try to get some crafting back in here after the PvP stuff, but crafting is, as you might understand, necessarily and joyfully complex. For example, over the last month, I've been working on cooking. Although interestingly, the results of my work is a lot less on the recipes of things you can cook, and a lot more on the recipes of the things you need in order to be able to cook. So if you're going to cook an apple tart, then it's important to know where did that apple come from, how did you get it. Therefore, it also went all the way back to farming and harvesting, apples. If you're going to cook it in a skillet, well, where did that skillet come from? That means you had to go all the way back through, miners who are mining iron out of the caves to provide ultimately the skillets required to do that cooking. So just by doing cooking, I've come up with, only a few dozen cooking recipes so far. I'm actually just now to the point where I'm finishing the recipes part, because the majority of my time and the majority of recipes has been spent filling out the recipes of all of the other aspects of the game that provide any kind of good or service to cooking, all the way back to its original source in the wilderness. And so anyway, I'm basically now through with that whole pass. If you look at our daily reports, you can see that's what I've been working on for about a month. I'm about to told this morning that I've been working with Michael Hutchison to break down the art list. In fact, we're gonna put a lot of that art out to the community, out to you guys, to see if you guys want to make. They're much more manageable size pieces: bananas, apples, plates, trays, ceramic goblets and glass goblets and iron goblets, all the way back. It's just a huge list of small physical items that we need. And also B is the main guy implementing all that, so he'll start tearing through it to make sure I've enumerated it correctly, although we've been working together on it. So I hope I've put it in a format that you can drop in the game fairly quickly.
Okay.
Our next question, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Our next suggestion / question comes from Artemis. He really loved the open party dungeons such as the sewers and Graph Mines. He'd like to see tiered dungeons in the future. Is there any plans for that?
There will be some dungeons that fit what he's describing. Right now, because you start off, like, you don't gain in power in any way, shape, or form, we really haven't been focusing too much on trying to balance anything and trying to make it so the dungeon gets tougher and tougher as you go down. We do have to have the catacombs in there. We've been doing a little design work on that, but we haven't started full implementation of that. But yeah, so eventually there will be more PvE focused dungeon type stuff, but really we need to get more character advancement, we need to get more skill stuff in there, we need to make it so, well, we need to get more creatures in there so we can actually have more balanced things rather than just making a big ogre at the end or whatever, a bigger version of some smaller thing. Yes, there will be more of that. It's just we're focusing on combat right now, and our most intelligent AIs are not AIs but players, so we haven't really focused on it. I'm sorry, I was just distracted by some chat stuff. And also by the fact that Star's laptop is about to die.
I'll go get power in a second.
Yes, I read that on his, and I was going to reply to him personally.
Lady Azure would like to know, what kind of things are you looking at for role-playing careers in the game, such as merchants being able to display items, librarians? Are there any of those things going in either in Release 9?
For Release 9, I don't know that we're going to be adding anything that will really add to the more sandboxing role-playing side of things. Again, as we had said over and over again, this release we're really focusing mostly on combat improvements. There will be some new opportunities, just that we're going to be opening up the first city, thing that we consider a city-level thing. Really, if you think about Owl's Head and the other stuff, those are either towns or villages. So this will be the first city that is several times larger than Owl's Head. So there will be some opportunities down there, and for those curious, yes, there are docks down there, and I will be down by the docks, I'm sure. But later on, we have talked about a number of things we're going to do to open up more role-playing opportunities. Honestly, a lot of the stuff that's going on in the game right now with the current releases is giving us more ideas too, so any of that stuff, as much as that continues, anything we can do to enhance those things. I know they're already doing plays and shows. I think Richard went to a play this last release. But again, we will be doing more stuff for sandboxy type elements, but just not for Release 9 or 10.
Yeah, there'll be some new deco items, so we're trying to make a pass-through on some of the things that have been in the add-on store or part of the Pledge Awards and get those in the game. Those usually lag about 1 or 2 releases after we do the initial pass on them to create the visual for putting on the web page. So some of those will come online along with some of the newer houses or updates to houses that we've made. So there'll be some more content. Yeah.
With the focus on content, we've had a couple of players ask about NPC mobs, monsters. Will there be any balancing done? Will there be any changes to how they spawn, or will some enemies be more dangerous depending on when you meet them? Things like NPC schedules, will any of that be addressed in combat for R9?
Yeah, we have not. We need to, once we have the R10 level of combat done, and we're feeling like we are to a point where we're 70% of the way to balance and getting things right. Most of the balance is going to be to refine PvP and make PvP more interesting. But once we have all that in place, well, one, all the creatures that are in the game are going to seem pitifully easy, probably, because the players will have so many more options. But after the R10 stuff is done, we will be able to go and take a pass at NPCs and make them more appropriately challenging. Right now, everything is pretty trivial, especially if you went out and did any adventuring in R8. If you were properly equipped, had the right skill set up. I did a little bit of adventuring without cheating, and it felt much, much easier now, just with all the new skill options. But yes, we will be doing more tuning, more testing once R10 is done, and we're most of the way through making combat fun and balanced.
Forgiven had an interesting question there. Can you address that one, Chris? Sorry, Gina, I jumped in on one of you there.
Chaos just brought us power. Thank you, Chaos.
Which one?
Forgiven was asking, is there going to be any anti-cheat measures to prevent macroing to gain skill? For example, doing fishing while you're technically AFK.
It's one of those things that's really hard to detect external stuff because these days, like that level of macroing is really hard to catch. If it's the, anybody who played Ultima Online, I know I got my first, 90% of my combat ability from a stack of quarters set on a key on my keyboard and just auto-attacking the dummy. But these days it's way more, it's even easier than that because all the keyboards have macros built into them. It's nearly impossible to detect a lot of these keyboard macro type things. So for that level of, if it's something where you can just hit a button over and over again and make it happen, it's really hard to prevent that type of stuff. But again, we will not have too many things in the game where that will actually be beneficial to sit there and hit a key. Even in our combos or in our combat stuff, that's part of the whole reason we changed up our combat system is because a lot of games had gotten to the point where my keyboard can play it better than I can. And that's kind of what we were trying to get away from. Crafting, also, I don't think there's going to be great ways to macro crafting. There may be minor elements of crafting that you can macro, but there's really not going to be that much. Fishing, you might be able to AFK fish. And we haven't even determined all the stuff on the on fishing mechanics and the interface for it, so that may not even be macroable. I guess the bottom line is I wouldn't worry about it too much. There might be still some opportunities for AFK advancement in that things like, what the common things is you have a powerful pet, you go stand in a dangerous place and let your pet kill things for you. Kind of been always one of those ways to advance while AFK. But Star's been quiet.
Not touching that with the pole.
I was AFK. I was macroing.
Yeah, that's part of why we're making the game not something where you can just hit one button in advance, and it is because it does make it more challenging for farmers and AFK people.
Well, we're about out of time, so our last question comes from Static Grazer, and it's for all three of you guys. As a dev, what are you hoping the players will try during R9? The last release was on PvP, for example, but what are you really hoping people will get in and get involved with during Release 9?
More PvP.
So the thing I'm hoping that players will try in this next release, well, more PvP, but more specifically, they should have enough skill options and equipment options, and they should be able to try playing different roles. So even if you're not PvPing, you should be able to go PvE and have here's my soloing deck made out, and then I can also switch over to my healing deck, and I'm going to be the tank type deck. People trying out multiple different roles in that. We'll try to make sure and give you guys enough skill points so you can pick enough elements. This last time we didn't really give you enough points so you could go and buy enough to even fill out one deck, not to mention have multiple roles, and that was a mistake on our part, but I called that my personal postmortem that I wrote up. So that's kind of one of the things I hope people try out this next time around is try playing out multiple roles. That's one of the points of having the multiple deck systems is you can assign different sets of armor to it, and you can assign different skill elements to it, and simulate, basically you can play a different class even though you're really playing the same class. And you can swap between those two. So that's one of the things I'd like to see people try out this next round, whether it's PvE or PvP. Go try out playing different roles.
And for me, as much as hard as it is for people to be building and decorating things, I know that Chaos, for example, was trying to give people some head starts this time around, so that since you only get 3 days to build stuff, it's kind of painful each release cycle to start from scratch. But without regard to those difficulties, I was sure enjoying seeing the variety of ways that the people are able to build in the world and even set up events. Because I enjoyed brainstorming even with the people who were running some of those live quests, the live plays, the mazes, and these sorts of things to make sure we provide you all the right tools to be able to do those well. And the only way we find those is if you try tools that are hard and kind of give us feedback as what would be the easy things for us to pull off to remove roadblocks from you and be able to do a high-quality job. or things we can do that aren't hard, that give you things, can let you make things that are either unique or powerful from a storytelling standpoint. So anyway, that's what I still hope you guys are doing, and what I'll be wandering around wanting to participate in. Plus, of course, I do challenge everybody to try to kill me. Only in that it shouldn't be possible, and if it is possible, shame on one of these two guys here on the other side of the call, because in theory I should be immortal, but that's always a good thing to test. And day one, before I was confident that I couldn't be injured, those few of you that met me on day one, you may notice that what I did in a PvP zone is I killed you first, and then invited you into my party, and that was to try to make sure that if anybody had the idea of killing me, I wanted to put that iron hammer down right away. So because I actually wasn't sure if I was truly immortal, but at this point in time, I have higher confidence, but only one way to be sure.
And just for the record, I think Richard has died in game during releases where someone could have seen him dead, but I think he was killed by wildlife or something.
That was before. That was before we had the flag set. So yes, I have died in game and at the hand of devs during the dev playtest sessions. I'm not immortal. The programming team only made Lord British immortal in the live build. So in any of the in-house builds, they can all kill me. Anyway, that way at least I see the balance of the game more like a real player. But obviously, this will be fun to see how this plays out for the next few months. Gina, close us out.
Okay, well, thank you so much. I know there were tons of questions that we did not get to, and yes, I did take priority for questions involving either mechanics that were in R8 or R9, but we'll be doing these again. We plan to do these monthly after each release, so you'll have a chance to ask your questions then again if we haven't answered them. Thank you so very much for joining us, and thank you for joining us in releases, because really the information that we learn from you each release just makes the game that much better, and we couldn't do it without you. So thank you very much, and we look forward to seeing you next time. Bye.